The thing about hospitals is that they never sleep. Even at 3 in the morning, there's always a machine humming, a nurse moving quietly past your door, a distant intercom crackling like static on an old radio. I came to in that sterile room with the scratchy blanket tucked too tightly around my feet and the antiseptic air clawing at my throat. I didn't know what day it was. I didn't even know if it was still June. But I knew I was alone. It took a few hours and a particularly gentle nurse named Mira for the details to come back. Mira had soft brown eyes and hands that knew how to fix and for without waking you. She sat at the edge of my bed and spoke in a low voice, as if she were telling me a bedtime story. She explained I'd collapsed in my kitchen, passed out right beside the dishwasher, still clutching a sponge in my hand. The neighbor, Donna, heard the crash. Thank God she was walking her dog late, or I might not have made it. You were severely dehydrated, Mira said, brushing a stray hair off my forehead. Your kidneys were failing. You had no idea. I shook my head, which throbbed like a bass drum. The truth was, I'd felt off for weeks. Dizzy spells, constant fatigue. My skin had taken on this strange yellowish hue that I'd chalked up to bad lighting or too much tea. But I hadn't said anything because I didn't want to ruin their vacation. They being my daughter Emily, her husband Chad, and their 2 perfect children. They'd saved for months for that cruise, something family-oriented with a kids' club and an all-you-can-eat buffet. Emily had been so excited when she called. We haven't had a real break since the twins were born, Mom. And the balcony cabin? It was half off. I even bought matching swimsuits for the girls. I remember smiling through the phone, biting back the nausea that had crept up from nowhere. I'm happy for you, honey, I said, pressing my fingers into my temple. She hesitated. You okay? You sound tired. I'm just a little under the weather, I admitted. Been feeling off. Dizzy. Well, you're not getting any younger, she said, laughing. You probably just need rest. Rest. That's what she said. Like that was some magical cure. I wanted to tell her more, to say I felt like my body was trying to send me a message. But the excitement in her voice, the way she was already mentally on the beach, made me hold back. Have fun, I told her. Take lots of pictures. And off they went. Meanwhile, I collapsed on the tile floor of my galley kitchen, surrounded by a week's worth of dirty dishes and unopened mail. The EMT said I was lucky, that if Donna hadn't found me when she did, I might have died right there beside the garbage can. I spent the next 3 days in and out of consciousness, my vitals zigzagging like a bad EKG rhythm. Nobody from my family called. Nobody came. Not until the 4th day. That's when Emily finally rang my cell. It was still in my purse, buried under a half-eaten granola bar and a set of expired coupons. Mom, you didn't answer my texts. Can you stop by the house and water the plants? Chad's going to freak if the Echeverria dies. It was a gift. I stared at the screen in disbelief, then croaked into the phone. Emily, I'm in the ICU. There was silence, the kind that stretches so long it becomes its own kind of noise. What? I collapsed, I whispered. The neighbors found me. I've been in the hospital. Oh my God. Why didn't you say something? I did, I said, eyes burning. You told me to rest. She stammered, then promised she'd catch the next flight home. But by the time she arrived, I'd slipped back under. I didn't see her. Just a pink post-it note on the bedside table. Glad you're feeling better. We'll talk soon. We didn't talk. At least, not in the way I needed. When they finally released me, I didn't go back to Emily's guest room like I used to when I needed care. I went home, to my little 2-bedroom bungalow with its creaky steps and the faded blue shutters. It was still warm from the summer sun, but the house felt cold. I sat on the edge of my bed and let the silence fill the room. And then I remembered something. 2 weeks before the trip, Emily had asked me if I could stay over at their house to watch the place. Water the plants. Feed the cat. Be useful. That word echoed now, useful. As long as I was cooking dinners and babysitting and folding laundry, I had a place in their world. But a sick mother? A weak mother? That didn't fit the aesthetic. That night, I stood in front of the mirror and saw a woman I didn't recognize. Gaunt. Pale. Eyes sunken like she hadn't slept in years. I picked up the framed picture on my dresser, one from Emily's wedding day, where I stood beside her in a lavender gown, my smile wide, my eyes proud. I stared at that version of myself and whispered, "She doesn't live here anymore." The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and started writing. Not emails, not shopping lists, but a plan, because they thought they'd left me to die. And they were going to be very surprised by the woman who walked out of that hospital. When I got home from the hospital, I didn't unpack right away. My hospital bag sat untouched by the front door, like it was waiting for someone else to pick it up. Someone more fragile, more defeated. But I wasn't that woman anymore. The one who kept quiet, who told herself to be grateful for scraps of affection, who gave everything until she had nothing left but a brittle smile. I had almost died. And while I was fighting for my life, my family was sipping cocktails on a beach somewhere, snapping selfies in wide-brimmed hats. They posted pictures. Oh yes, I saw them. My neighbor Donna, bless her nosy heart, had printed them out when she heard where I'd been. She slid them across my table like it was evidence in a murder case. "Did they know you were in the hospital?" she asked, her voice careful. I just stared at the glossy photos. Emily in a sundress, the twins buried in sand up to their necks. Chad raising a glass. The captions were worse than the photos. Family first. Grateful heart. Rest and recharge. I didn't cry. Not anymore. I poured myself a cup of tea, let it go cold, and then pulled out the manila envelope I had kept tucked in the back of my closet for years. Inside was everything they'd forgotten I had: my will, old insurance papers, a copy of the deed to this very house, and a notebook. A little leather-bound journal I used to scribble in during quiet moments when the kids were small, and I still believed love could fix everything. Flipping through those pages was like stepping into a time machine. Birthday lists, recipes, dreams for retirement that involved lemon trees and a screened-in porch. There was a drawing Emily made in second grade. She'd drawn us holding hands under a rainbow, labeled it me and Mommy forever. I traced the tiny stick figure and shook my head. Forever is such a big word when you're 7. I started calling places the next morning. Not doctors, not lawyers, realtors. "I'm just looking," I told the woman on the phone. "Something coastal. One story. Porch with a swing if possible." She was chipper. Didn't ask why. Didn't judge. Within a week, I was on a short list for 3 places along the coast. I drove out to see them myself, packed a thermos of coffee and a half-dozen ginger cookies. When I pulled up to the second one, I sat there in the driveway for nearly an hour. It was perfect. A white clapboard house with blue shutters, just like the ones I'd wanted when I was a girl. A breeze rustled the seagrass. Somewhere nearby, a gull cried out like a reminder, "You're still alive." Act like it. I put in an offer that afternoon. In cash. I didn't tell Emily. She was still texting once a week by then. Little messages like, "Hey, can you remind me what temp to bake the banana bread?" Or, "What was that cream you used on Lily's rash?" Always practical. Always expectant. Never a, "How are you feeling, Mom?" So, when I closed on the house, I sent her one thing. A picture. Me, standing on the wraparound porch, holding a set of keys. My hair still thin from the hospital stay. My body still tired. But my eyes? Oh, they were fierce. I waited. Less than 5 minutes later, my phone rang. "Mom, what is this?" Emily's voice was tight, too high-pitched to be casual. "My new home," I said calmly. "I thought you should know. But you didn't say you were looking. What about the house? The kids? They'll be fine," I said. "You've got a lovely nanny. And a husband. And a village of Instagram followers who love your banana bread." Silence. "You're serious?" As a second chance. She didn't know what to say. For the first time in years, Emily, my daughter who always had an answer, always had a plan, was speechless. I ended the call gently. No malice, just finality. Then I stood on that porch and watched the sun dip below the waterline. The sky turned to fire, and I breathed. Not just air. Freedom. They had left me behind. But I was the one who moved forward. The first morning in the new house, I woke to the sound of waves and the creak of the porch swing rocking in the wind. No alarms, no footsteps overhead, no cartoons blaring from the living room. Just peace. I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders and stepped onto the porch with my coffee. The ocean glittered like glass shards under the early light. For a second, I felt like I was standing inside someone else's dream. Then I remembered I'd built this. I paid for this. I made it happen. I was alive, and I had done something just for me. It didn't take long before word got back to Emily. Coastal towns are funny that way. News trickles faster than tides. I was having lunch at the little cafe near the marina, fish tacos and sweet tea, when Donna called. She's posted on Facebook, Donna said. Always 3 steps ahead of everyone. What now? I asked, though I already had a hunch. Some long post about betrayal and abandonment. Very poetic. Something about sacrificing everything for people who throw it back in your face. I chuckled. Sounds familiar. People are asking questions, Donna added, her voice lowering. She didn't mention your name, but they know. Let them wonder. I wasn't trying to make a statement. I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. I was just done being the background character in a story I helped write. The house came with a garden, too, overgrown, unruly, and full of potential. That became my therapy. Every day I slipped on my gloves and went to work, clearing weeds, turning soil, planting something new. Hydrangeas, tomatoes, lavender. Every root I pressed into the earth felt like a declaration. You didn't kill me. You just made me grow somewhere else. By the second week, Emily called again. This time her voice was different, quieter. Not angry, not yet. Just confused. Mom, are you okay? I'm better than okay. I didn't expect you to leave. You didn't expect me to live. That silence again. So many things unsaid between us, stretched across years of expectation and guilt and tiny, cutting comments. I was scared, she whispered. Of what? That you'd need me more than I could give. I thought about that. Let it settle in my bones. That's the thing, Emily. I didn't need anything but to be seen. Heard. And you couldn't even give me that. I didn't know, she said. You didn't ask. We didn't hang up angry. We just hung up. And for now, that was enough. I didn't need an apology wrapped in flowers or a heartfelt card scribbled in guilt. I needed space. I needed soil. I needed salt air and silence. That afternoon, I planted a peach tree in the backyard. It was small and delicate and probably too close to the fence, but I didn't care. I named her Ruth, after my mother, who never got the chance to plant anything of her own. That night, I sat on the porch and watched the moon rise, a soft, glowing reminder that even in darkness, there's light. It just takes time. Emily had gone on vacation while I nearly died, but I had gone and found a life, and they hadn't even seen the beginning yet. By the time the 3rd week rolled around, the quiet began to feel like music. No one barging in with laundry to be folded. No request to babysit at the last minute. No running to the pharmacy because someone forgot their allergy meds again. It was just me, my peach tree Ruth, and the endless hush of the waves. And then one morning, I got a wedding invitation in the mail. It wasn't from Emily. It was from her friend Kelsey, the one who used to come over for sleepovers when they were in high school. The one I once stayed up with until 3 a.m. because she'd had a fight with her parents. I hadn't heard from her in years, but there it was, a white envelope with gold foil lettering, addressed to Ms. Margaret Holloway. My full name, not Mom, not Granny, not, hey, can you bring the potato salad? Just Margaret. There was a handwritten note inside. I heard you moved to the coast. I don't know what happened, but I just wanted you to know. You were always like a second mom to me. I hope you'll come. I sat at the kitchen table with that invitation for a long time, running my fingers along the edges. Not because I was emotional, though I'll admit my chest felt tight, but because it reminded me that someone had seen me. Someone had remembered. That same week, Emily posted another message on social media. Some quote about toxic people who walk away when it gets hard. I didn't respond, but I did unfollow her. That might sound petty, but it wasn't. It was survival. I spent the rest of the day rearranging the living room. I moved a chair near the window and made it a reading nook. I ordered a set of watercolor paints online. even though I hadn't picked up a brush in 20 years. I started humming again, just little tunes under my breath. Nothing recognizable, but enough to feel like mine. And then one afternoon, Chad called. That was unexpected. He never called me, not once, not even when Emily gave birth to the twins. "Hey, Margaret," he said, too chipper. "Just checking in." Emily's worried. "About what?" "Well, you disappearing. She says you're not answering texts." I needed space. Right. Totally. Just she's been posting stuff and people are asking questions. It's a little awkward. That's when I realized what this was. It wasn't about concern. It was about control. About image. About perception. Emily wasn't worried about me. She was worried about what people might say when they realized her mother had packed up and vanished from her life. "Tell Emily I'm fine," I said. "And I'm not coming back." There was a pause. Back. To the life where I only mattered when it was convenient. He didn't respond. Just mumbled something and hung up. That night, I made lemon chicken and set the table for one. And I lit a candle not because anyone was watching, but because I wanted to. I sat down with a notebook and started a list titled, "Things I Still Want to Do." Paint a sunrise, take a cooking class, learn to dance again, forgive her maybe. The last one, I left without a check mark. I'm not there yet, but I'm getting closer. I don't know what exactly I expected when they came back from their vacation, tanned and smiling and brimming with stories about sandcastles and snorkeling. Maybe part of me thought Emily would drop everything, run to me, and finally realize what almost happened. But they didn't come back with urgency. They came back with souvenirs. Emily sent me a text the morning after they landed. "We're back. The twins made you a seashell magnet. Let's get coffee soon." A seashell magnet. For the mother who nearly died alone. I didn't answer right away. I spent the morning pruning Ruth, my peach tree, and baking blueberry muffins from scratch. My first time in years. I made them just the way my own mother used to, with a little sugar crust on top and a whisper of lemon zest. I wrapped a few in a clean kitchen towel and set them in a basket. Then I drove back to Charleston. Not to visit, not to stay, but to deliver a message. Emily opened the door wearing a workout set and surprise on her face. "Mom, you're here." "I had a few things I wanted to return," I said calmly, holding out the basket. Her eyes darted to the muffins. "Oh, that's sweet. Come in, I'll get coffee." "No need. I won't stay long." Chad appeared in the hallway. That same smug look he always wore when he thought he had the upper hand. "We were just about to head out," he said, clearly relieved. "I won't be long," I repeated, then reached into my purse and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Emily's brow furrowed. "What's that?" "Just a few things you might need." I handed it to her. Inside were copies of the hospital discharge papers, a list of missed calls, my real estate contract, and a note I had written by hand. "I don't want an apology. I want you to remember what it feels like when someone vanishes. And I want you to ask yourself why you didn't notice." Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. Chad leaned over to peek, then scoffed. "So what, you're punishing us?" "No," I said, folding the towel neatly from the muffin basket. "I'm setting boundaries. There's a difference." Emily looked up at me, her eyes glassy. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because you wouldn't have heard me. Not until it was quiet enough." I turned to go, but paused at the door. "Oh, and you can keep the magnet. I have no use for it now." The door closed behind me with a soft click. No screaming, no dramatic scene. Just the quiet satisfaction of a woman who had learned her worth the hardest way possible. I got into my car and drove home to my little house by the sea. The sun was setting when I pulled into the driveway. Ruth's leaves were rustling, and a pair of birds had taken up residence in the branches. I took it as a sign. Life was growing here, and I was too. Emily and Chad were speechless when I left. Good. It was their turn to sit in silence. I kept the envelope she tried to return. A week after that visit, a package arrived at my new address. No return label, just my name in that familiar handwriting. Rounded letters, neat, deliberate. Inside was the seashell magnet, and a note. I didn't know. I should have. I don't know how to fix this. Emily. That was it. No apology. No plea. Just a single sentence of guilt wrapped in silence. I set the magnet on the counter and stared at it for a long time. It was clumsily made, plastic backing, a little sand stuck in the glue. The shell cracked along one side. I remembered helping her make something similar in Girl Scouts when she was 7. We'd laughed when the glitter spilled everywhere. Now it just made my stomach twist. I didn't throw it out. I didn't display it either. I placed it in a small drawer in the kitchen next to my measuring spoons and an old ring that no longer fit. That's where I kept things that were too painful to see and too meaningful to lose. I started writing again. Only this time it wasn't grocery lists or plans or things I needed to get done. These were letters, dozens of them, to Emily, to my mother, to my younger self. I wrote one to Chad. Though it was mostly just curses and questions I'd never have the nerve to say aloud. But the letter I kept returning to, the one that wouldn't let me sleep, was the one I wrote to Emily the night before my collapse. I'd never finished it. It started simple: I'm scared something's wrong. I don't want to ruin your trip. But if something happens, I love you. I had folded it in half and left it on the counter. She never saw it. Or maybe she did and pretended she hadn't. That thought haunted me. That maybe, even if I'd screamed, she wouldn't have heard me over the sound of the life she thought she had built without me. I started therapy, too. Small town, small office, no waiting room music. Just me and a woman named Janelle who wore sensible shoes and asked questions that made me feel like I was unraveling in a safe way. When I told her everything about the hospital, the silence, the postcard apology, the seashell magnet, she didn't gasp or try to fix it. She just said, "And how do you want to be seen now?" It was the first time someone had asked me that in years. How did I want to be seen? Not as the matriarch, the fixer, the unpaid babysitter. Not even as the survivor. I want to be seen as someone still becoming. Not done. Not discarded. Still capable of joy and anger and every shade in between. I told Janelle about the garden. About Ruth. About how I sat beside that little tree every night with a cup of tea and watched the sky change. She smiled and said, "Sounds like you're finally rooted." Rooted. That word stuck with me. I wrote it on a sticky note and put it on the mirror in my hallway. That weekend, I made a peach cobbler from scratch and took half of it to the women at the shelter down the road. I didn't do it for praise. I did it because it felt good to give without being asked, without being used. Emily hasn't visited. Not yet. I think she's still trying to figure out whether she's ready to see the mother who doesn't need her approval anymore. And that's fine. I'll keep writing. I'll keep planting. I'll keep choosing myself. Because the woman who nearly died in silence is no longer afraid to live out loud. Fall came early that year. The mornings cooled quicker than usual, and the sea breeze turned crisp, tugging at the sleeves of my sweater when I stepped outside to check on Ruth. She was thriving, tall, leafy, proud. Tiny buds had started forming near the ends of her branches. Too soon for fruit, but not too soon for hope. That's how I measured progress now. Not in apologies received or relationships mended, but in the things I could nurture with my own 2 hands. It was during one of those chilly mornings that a silver sedan pulled into my gravel driveway. I watched from the kitchen window, half expecting it to be a delivery or a neighbor with a lost dog. But then the driver stepped out. Emily. She wore her guilt in the way she didn't meet my eyes right away. Her coat was too light for the weather, and she kept smoothing the fabric like it might make her invisible. I opened the door before she knocked. "Hi," she said, voice brittle. "Hi," I replied, stepping aside. "Come in if you want." She hesitated, then nodded. She walked through the doorway like someone entering a museum. Quiet, cautious, reverent. She looked older than I remembered. Not in a cruel way, just worn. Like life had finally started to press in on her the way it had always pressed on me. I made tea. We sat at the kitchen table, across from one another like strangers who shared a face. "I've been meaning to come," she started. "You're here now." She fiddled with the edge of the coaster. I didn't know what to say. "Then don't say anything," I said, sipping my tea. "Just sit." We sat for 10 full minutes in silence. The only sound was the tick of the little lighthouse clock on the wall and the wind rattling the windows. "I was scared," she said finally. her voice barely above a whisper. When you got sick. I didn't know how bad it was. I didn't know you were so alone. I wasn't alone, I said. I had me. She blinked, surprised, and maybe a little ashamed. I think I forgot who you were, she admitted. You never bothered to ask. Another silence. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a book, a photo album. The old kind with clear sleeves and scalloped edges. I hadn't seen it in decades. I found this in the hall closet, she said. Thought you might want it. I flipped through the pages. Pictures of her as a baby, chubby and bald and grinning. Me, young and tired and radiant in the way only exhausted mothers can be. A picture of us at the beach, long before she'd ever seen one with a resort attached. Thank you, I said. She wiped her eyes. I didn't reach out. We weren't there yet, but we were in the same room. That was a start. Before she left, she stood at the door and looked out at the peach tree. You planted that? Yes. What's its name? She asked, smiling slightly, as if remembering the stories I used to tell her about naming trees in the yard when she was little. Ruth, I said. Like Grandma? I nodded. She'd be proud, she said. She'd be surprised I finally took her advice. And with that, Emily stepped off the porch and walked back to her car. She didn't hug me. I didn't cry. But the gravel crunched beneath her feet like music, and I knew something had shifted. Not everything was healed, but the garden would keep growing. And so would I. After Emily's visit, things didn't change dramatically. There wasn't a sudden rush of daily phone calls or surprise visits with the twins. She didn't beg for forgiveness or vow to make up for everything. But she did text. Every few days, something small. Made your muffin recipe this morning. Burnt them. You always made it look easy. Or, Lily wants to plant a tree now. Says Grandma's tree is magic. Sometimes that's all you need, a whisper of effort, a breadcrumb trail back to something that once felt whole. In the quiet days that followed, I started something new. A project. I took the letters I'd been writing and began organizing them by theme. Grief, motherhood, silence, awakening. I didn't intend to do anything with them at first. They were just mine, raw, scribbled, unedited fragments of a woman piecing herself back together. But one morning, while sipping coffee and staring at Ruth from the kitchen window, I thought, what if someone else needs these too? So I called the librarian at the small town library down the road. Told her I had an idea for a little community event. Nothing fancy, just a reading circle. A gathering of women like me, or not like me, who might have their own stories and scars and songs they've never sung aloud. She said yes. I called it Letters We Never Sent. It started with just 6 women, then 11, then 20. Each week, we sat in a circle, coffee mugs balanced on knees, tissues passed quietly hand to hand, and read letters we'd written to people who never got them. To mothers, to daughters, to husbands, to old selves. My letter to Emily, the one I never sent from the hospital, was the first I read aloud. Halfway through, my voice caught. A woman named June, sitting to my right, squeezed my hand. When I finished, there was silence. Not the kind that bites, but the kind that holds space. That's when I realized my pain wasn't unique, and neither was my strength. One evening after a session, a woman in her 60s approached me. She had silver hair down to her shoulders and eyes that looked like they'd weathered more than just wind. You don't know me, she said, but your story, it helped me walk out of a house I didn't think I'd survive another year in. I hugged her. I didn't ask questions, because I understood. I kept the magnet Emily sent, though I never told her that. I hot glued the crack shell back together and set it on a shelf in my writing nook, right beside the jar of pens and the framed picture of me and Ruth under a summer sky. Some nights I still write letters, not out of grief anymore, but out of gratitude, for the second chance, for the strength I didn't know I still had, for the silence that made me listen to myself again. It was a Tuesday, crisp and windswept, the kind of day that makes you want to pull something warm over your shoulders and remember who you used to be. I was setting a pie to cool, apple with extra cinnamon like my mother used to make, when the knock came. Not a soft tap, a full, deliberate knock. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, expecting Donna or one of the reading group women. But it wasn't. It was Chad, standing on my porch in slacks too stiff for our little town, holding a to-go coffee cup like a peace offering. "Hi, Margaret," he said, forcing a tight-lipped smile. I stared at him, confused. "You lost." He laughed like he thought I was joking. I wasn't. "Mind if I come in for a second?" "I do, actually." I stepped onto the porch but didn't open the door fully. He shifted, clearly not used to being denied. "Emily doesn't know I came." "That doesn't surprise me. I just wanted to say," he paused, searching for the words like he hadn't actually prepared them. Things got tense, and maybe I didn't handle everything perfectly. That was the understatement of the decade. He scratched the back of his neck. "She misses you. The girls too." I raised a brow. The same girls who didn't know I was in the hospital while their parents were snorkeling. He winced. "Look, we all make mistakes." "You didn't make a mistake, Chad. You made a decision. Several of them. And so did I." He looked past me into the house, probably noting how cozy it all looked, the floral curtains, the fresh pie, the vase of lavender on the table. Maybe he realized for the first time what I'd built without them. "Emily says you're doing readings at the library. That you're writing." "I am." "What's it about?" "Life after death," I said. Metaphorically. He didn't know what to say to that. "I'll let you get back to your pie," he muttered, stepping back. "Take care, Chad," I said. "Tell Emily she knows how to reach me, if she wants to talk like grown women do." And with that, I closed the door. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still, like a lake that had finally stopped being stirred. Later that night, I wrote a new letter. "Dear me, you didn't crumble. You didn't disappear. You learned how to leave without slamming the door, how to forgive without inviting the wound back in. You chose yourself, and you kept choosing her. I'm proud of you." I signed it with my full name, Margaret Holloway, a woman no longer afraid to be remembered. It was a sunny Sunday when I returned to Charleston, not to stay, but to speak. The library invited me to host a reading of the letters from our coastal group. Word had spread. What started with 6 women and some lukewarm coffee had grown into something bigger, something stronger. Women were coming from all over the county now. Some drove in from Savannah. One took a train from Raleigh. I wore navy that day. A long skirt, soft blouse, the locket my mother gave me after Emily was born. I stood at the podium in a small room that smelled of old paper and bravery, holding a sheaf of papers that had taken me a lifetime to write. I read for nearly 30 minutes. Letters about silence, about near death, about awakening in a life you thought was over. When I finished, the applause didn't matter nearly as much as the faces I saw standing in the back of the room. Emily and the girls. The twins held hands, wide-eyed in the way children are when they sense something important is happening. Emily looked older, maybe because she'd finally stopped running from herself. She gave me a tiny nod. I returned it. Afterward, she came up slowly. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, Emily. I didn't know you were this." I smiled. "That's because you were too busy making me smaller in your head." She bit her lip. "I'm sorry." I didn't rush to hug her. I didn't pretend everything was fixed. But I did say, "I'm glad you came." One of the twins, Lily, stepped forward. "Grandma, are you famous now?" I knelt beside her, brushing a curl behind her ear. "Not famous, sweetheart. Just finally telling my story." That night, I drove home with the windows cracked, letting the salt air swirl through the car. I parked in the driveway, stepped onto the porch, and looked at Ruth. She was blooming. Full blossoms, soft and fragrant, tilted toward the moonlight like they had something to say. I stood there barefoot, one hand on the porch rail, and whispered, "We made it." Because I did. Through the abandonment, the ICU, the silence, the reckoning. They came home to a mother they didn't recognize. And for once, I wasn't trying to make them comfortable. I was just trying to be free. And I was.